Tomorrow on More to Life, the life you were meant to live.
We'll look at
Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. So happy to be back here with you. Thanks for your patience with me. I will assume that you had patience with me, that I was out sick for a few days. Thank you very much to Chris Check and to Edgar, who covered for me while I was away. And Jimmy Akin's here today. We got 2 hours of open forum. You are welcome to call and ask whatever you like. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin, of course, is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, the author of many books. I got a stack of Jimmy's books right here with me. Let me mention a couple I don't usually mention. Teaching with Authority. He's the author of that, the subtitle being How to Cut Through Doctrinal Confusion and Understand What the Church Really Says. And then let me see another one. Fathers Know Best. I rarely mention that one. Your Essential Guide to the Teachings of the Early Church. And also the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Hello, Jimmy Akin.
Hello, Cyril Kellett. You're dressed like a lumberjack today, sort of.
Well, thank you. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
And before we came on the air, I made a Monty Python reference and said you're a lumberjack and you're okay. Mm-hmm. And then you started whistling a song, but it wasn't that tune. You started whistling the Daniel Boone song.
Oh, I sometimes do that. Replace one melody for another. And until
kind of an audio malapropism.
Yeah, I think I file them very close together in my brain.
Mm-hmm. They're similar.
Limited space. And then when I retrieve them, I don't always retrieve the right melody. I didn't realize I had done Daniel Boone, though. Mm-hmm. I loved the Daniel Boone TV show when I was a kid.
Did you?
Oh, I was so happy when that came on. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Cool.
Daniel Boone was a man. That's actually the first line of the song. I never thought about that.
He was a brave man.
Daniel Boone was a man. That's a weird way to start a song. But what a good show. Yes, I look like a lumberjack because earlier we did a pre-record, you and I was wearing an orange shirt, and you said I looked like a jack-o'-lantern, so I thought I would improve upon
that. You smile a lot, and you were in orange.
Mm-hmm.
And I also dubbed you Halloween Cy, and we talked about the 1974 David Bowie song Diamond Dogs, which is about a post-apocalyptic scenario where people, the survivors, may go to an abandoned jewelry store and get a diamond brooch, and so that's why they're called the Diamond Dogs. One of the characters in the song is Halloween Jack, and we're told he's a real cool cat and he lives on top of Manhattan Chase Bank, obviously. And I mentioned that I was having trouble getting the lyric out of my head. Halloween Cy is a real cool guy, and he lives on top of Manhattan Chase. The elevator is broke, so he slides down a rope onto the street below. Oh, Tarzan, go man, go.
But I thought I would avoid all this trouble of getting called a pumpkin by changing shirts, but no, you went with lumberjack. I think lumberjack is good. Lumberjack is a very honorable profession, I think.
Yeah.
I think, providing the ability for people to build homes, it's a noble work.
Among many other consumer goods.
But if it had to be one of those two jacks, a lumberjack or a jack-o'-lantern, I would take lumberjack.
Okay.
Yeah.
De gustibus non est disputandum.
But when you say that makes me think you would pick jack-o'-lantern.
No, I'm just saying there's no disputing about taste.
All right. The number, I can give out the number, 888-318-7884, but lines have filled up as we were discussing. And John in Texas is numero uno today. John, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hello, Mr. Akin. My question today is regarding Deuteronomy 21, verses 10 through 14. How would you answer a skeptic who asks, why would God command what appears to be sexual slavery? Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, first thing, we should read the text, and God is not demanding that anyone go out and take sex slaves. Here's what the passage says. When you go out for battle against your enemies, and Yahweh your God gives them into your hand, and you lead the captives away, so it's presupposing they've taken captives, and you see among the captives a woman beautiful in appearance, and you become attached to her, and you want to take her as a wife, so it's presupposing all of this stuff has happened. This is not God commanding anybody to do this. This is just saying, okay, you went out, you got in battle, God let you have a victory, and you got attracted to one of the captive women. What do you do in that situation? You want to make her your wife. Then you shall bring her into your household, and she shall shave her head, and she shall trim her nails. So if she's got long, beautiful fingernails like women often do, she's going to cut those off. And she's going to shave off all her hair. Psych-Elliot.
Yes.
If you've been attracted to a woman and then she cuts off all her hair and chops off all her fingernails, is that going to make her more attractive or less attractive to you?
Less. I love fingernails. That's one of them.
Okay.
So crazy for fingernails.
So the first thing God wants to happen in this situation is he wants to make the woman less attractive. I wonder why that might be. And she shall remove the clothing of her captivity from her, and she shall remain in your house, and she shall mourn her father and mother for a full month. So, Sai, if you've just killed this woman's relatives, including her father and mother, and brought her into your household, and she's cut off her hair and chopped off her fingernails, and now she's wailing and keening for her father and mother for a full month, is that going to make you more or less inclined to want this woman as your wife?
I'm not really big on wailing and keening. I'm going to go with less.
Yeah, if anything, it's going to make you feel kind of guilty for your participation in the slaying of her family. After this, you may know her and you may marry her and she may become your wife. Okay, so only after all that month, you got to support this woman for a month. She's going to make herself look ugly and she's going to painfully, emotionally remind you for a full month of what you did to her family. And only if you still want her after all that, she may become your wife. Well, what happens if you have buyer's remorse? And then, if you do not take delight in her, then you shall let her go to do whatever she wants, but you shall not treat her as a slave. So if she was a slave, you could like sell her to someone else, and get some money back on your investment of, killing her family and then bringing her home and supporting her for a full month and putting up with all the wailing and keening and stuff like that. You don't get to do that. You cannot sell her. You cannot recoup your investment. Why? Since you have dishonored her. So God acknowledges right in this passage that this is a bad thing, that you are dishonoring this woman by doing this to her. And he puts a bunch of restrictions on it to disincentivize you from dishonoring this woman by forcing her to marry you. God is not endorsing sexual slavery. God is trying to mitigate sexual slavery and get men not to do it, even though it was part of their culture. It was expected. If you conquer people, you see an attractive woman, you can take her as a wife. They had hard hearts, as Jesus said. They weren't prepared to give up those customs altogether. So God is regulating it, making it harder for these men to do these things, and flatly acknowledges at the climax of the passage that this is bad. This is dishonoring these women.
I'm going to leave that there, John, because you have brought us to the break. Thank you very much for the question. We'll take that break. We'll be right back with, every line full now. Lots and lots of questions to come. It's Open Forum with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The most original Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
On Mother Angelica Answering the Call, Father Joseph and Doug Keck mine decades of phone calls answered by Mother Angelica. No subject is off limits and no problem too big for the wisdom and compassion of the one and only Mother Angelica.
Mother Angelica answering the call, Sunday afternoon, 2 Eastern, on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. It's open forum. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Jimmy Akin, as I said earlier, the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. A new episode drops each Friday, and it immediately becomes one of the most popular things, one of the most popular documentary podcasts that you can find. And what drops tomorrow, Jimmy?
We're taking a trip back to 1982 in Chicago, and we're going to be looking at the 1982 Chicago Tylenol murders, where a bunch of people went to the store, bought Tylenol, came home, and dropped dead. And it was found that the some of the capsules in the bottles that they bought had been laced with cyanide. And so this looked like a clear case of murder. The government quickly developed the theory that it was the work of a lone, crazy individual who went to stores, picked up bottles, took them home, laced them with cyanide, and then put them back on the shelves, and which was very easy to do back then. They didn't have all the modern product tampering things we do now. That's why we have those now, is because of this series of murders. That's why the boxes are glued shut. There's an outer seal around the rim of the bottle, and there's an inner seal under the cap. So if someone has poisoned the capsules inside, you can tell that's been done, or tell it's been tampered with anyway. But the government adopted very quickly this lone, crazy individual theory. We're going to be telling you about the lone individuals who were kind of crazy that they suspected. And then we're going to reveal why the lone crazy individual theory is wrong.
Really?
They took a fundamental misstep in their interpretation of the case early on, and it derailed it.
Oh, I have to listen. I remember that case, but I didn't know that the later development said that it had been wrong, that idea.
It's not just later developments. They mismanaged this from the beginning, and Johnson & Johnson was happy to have them settle on the lone and crazy individual theory.
Well, you always hear that Johnson & Johnson handled this like that. I think they teach it in business school as well.
They do. Yeah. How to handle public relations disasters based on this case, and they did a great job from a public relations perspective.
Oh, there's a little tease for you, because that's not the only perspective. All right, check it out tomorrow on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Mysterious.fm is where you can go, or just type in Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Let's see. Next we have Yeonatan in Illinois, watching on YouTube. I hope that I pronounced that right. Yeonatan, is that correct?
No, it's Yehonatan.
Yehonatan. Okay, I beg your pardon.
Accent
It's
on
the
yeah. Accent was on the ho, the way he said it. Yehonatan.
Oh, I bet. Yes, you're right.
So accent on the antepenult.
Yes, I'm a Hebrew Catholic. That's my name is Hebrew.
Yeah, great for you. Same name as Jonathan in English.
Yes, that is my English name. Actually, Jews usually have two names. We usually have a name in the native language of the land, and the name and a Hebrew name,
like Saul and Paul.
Yes,
or Jimmy and Yakub.
Yeah, but my question is this: I have a question. So, how do I respond to Protestants? Because I'm still in RCIA. I'm still relatively new to the Catholic faith. I'm going through the process of being confirmed and everything. But how do I respond to my Protestant friends who ask me continuously about the Blessed Virgin Mary, how the brothers and sisters, it's mentioned brothers and sisters of the Messiah in the Gospels, and I try to explain it to them that these are relatives, because the word adelphos means not just brother, it means relatives. But what else can I say towards my Protestant brothers and sisters?
Okay, well, the first thing I'd point out, Yehonatan, is this comes up a lot, and we've got a lot of resources as a result for it on Catholic.com. So to get some additional background beyond what I'll share, you can also go to Catholic.com and type in Brothers of Christ or virginity of Mary, and all kinds of things are going to come up. In terms of what I would point out, well, you're correct that the term adelphos, which literally gets translated as brother, can mean a bunch of different things. It can mean, for example, brothers German, which is what we would otherwise call a full brother, meaning he's your brother and he's got the two same parents. It can also mean half brother, where you have one parent in common, either the father or the mother. It can mean adopted brothers, people who are legally your brother, even though they don't share either parent in common. It can mean foster brothers or stepbrothers, where they're the children of one parent legally, but that's not your biological parent. So like your stepfather's sons would be your stepbrothers, but they don't share, since it's your stepfather, he's not your biological father, he's your legal father. And since they're not sons of your mother, they're not biological brothers. So stepbrothers is another meaning. Then we get wider uses, in particular in Hebrew circles. The term brother could be used for any male relative because, as you may know, biblical Hebrew does not have words for, it doesn't have as many male kinship terms as we do in English. It has a word, it has the word for father, ab, it has the word for brother, ach, and it has the word for son. And so all male relatives have to go into one of those categories. And a father is anyone you're descended from. A son is anyone descended from you, no matter how many generations later. And a brother is anybody else. So things like cousins, nephews, those are going to go in the brother category in terms of biblical relationship naming conventions in Hebrew, among Hebrews. And then it can take on yet other meanings, like people who are just affiliated in some way, such as by spiritual ties. That's why we as Christians are brothers. So it can mean a bunch of different things, and we have to look at the at other factors to determine which meaning is most appropriate in which case. So, Psychelet, could the brothers of Jesus mentioned in Scripture have been his brothers German?
Well,
his full brothers.
No, not consistently with what we
okay.
Already know.
Why not? Why not?
Because a full brother would mean that his parents were Mary and Joseph, and their parents would be Mary and Joseph.
Right. So they can't share the same human father. Therefore, they cannot be brothers German. And this is something that I think is important to point out to people who are very tied to the idea that they're his half brothers, because they'll just look at which would mean Joseph is their father and Mary is their mother, and so they're half brothers because Jesus doesn't have Joseph as a biological father. I think it's important to point this out because they'll say, well, it's the word brother. What's the most natural meaning of the word brother? We should just go with that. Well, the most natural meaning of the word brother is brother German. And it can't mean that here because Joseph is not Jesus's father. So if Joseph and Mary are their parents, they cannot be brothers German. And therefore, nobody who's a Christian and believes in the virgin birth of Christ believes that the most normal meaning of the word brother applies to these individuals. All of us who believe in the virgin birth of Christ have to say the word brother here is not taking on its normal meaning. And once you make that point, it opens up the doors to, okay, so what other meanings are there? Half brother is not the most normal meaning of the word. So we shouldn't just assume it's half brother. There are all these other possible meanings. Now, I think we can eliminate some of them, like the idea of being spiritual brothers, because that's true of all Christians. And if that were the case, you wouldn't have this certain group of individuals, most prominently James the Just, described as Jesus's brothers. It's implied there's some kind of family relationship here. So there is a family relationship, and we can eliminate full brother. We can eliminate spiritual brother, which is a non-family relationship. It's one of these other meanings. just based on certain texts, you could think it's half-brother, but you could also say they're stepbrothers or adopted brothers or cousins or nephews or something like that. And it's a little tricky to try to pin down which it is. But we do have evidence in the New Testament against it being half-brothers. On the half-brother theory, Joseph and Mary would be their parents. But we have evidence against that in that when the angel Gabriel, this is in Luke 2, when the angel Gabriel shows up to tell Mary that she's going to be the mother of the Messiah, her immediate response is, "How will this be? Because I know not man." So she obviously knows the facts of life here. She knows how women get babies. And she's saying, how is this going to be? Because I'm not doing that. I don't have relations with a man. Well, at this moment, she's already betrothed to Joseph. She's already legally married to him, which is why Matthew says that Joseph planned to divorce her quietly, because it would have to break this legal relationship between them. So if she's already legally married and is saying, how am I going to get pregnant because I don't know a man, that suggests she's not planning on an ordinary marriage. That suggests she's planning on a chaste, not just a chaste marriage, but a continent marriage where she and Joseph are not going to be having sexual relations, which is in fact what a document from the 2nd century known as the Infancy Gospel of James, also known as the Proto-Evangelium of James, says. It says that Joseph was an elderly widower who already had children and was not looking to have more children, and that's why he was willing to become the married guardian of a consecrated virgin like Mary, who had been vowed to virginity. And so we've got that in the 2nd century, and that perfectly explains the situation we would have here, in which case the so-called brothers of Jesus were his brothers. They were his stepbrothers through Joseph, not half-brothers through Mary. There are other possibilities that have also been explored, but to just cite another, and that, by the way, is the earliest record we have of a discussion of precisely who these brothers are. It indicates they were stepbrothers. Another indication that suggests that they were not his half-brothers is in John 19 at the crucifixion. Mary's there at the foot of the cross, and Jesus acknowledges her and the beloved disciple, the author of the gospel, and says, "Son, behold your mother, and mother, behold your son." And it tells us that from that moment, the beloved disciple took Mary into his own household. And this would make no sense if Mary had other children. If Mary's own sons were around, Mary's own sons would be the ones that she would be cared for by. In fact, it would be a colossal insult to assign her to an outsider, to someone who's not a family member. It would imply something was devastatingly wrong with Jesus' own brothers if he couldn't trust them to care for their own mother. So that also suggests that these were not her children, because the only way to explain her assignment for care to an outsider is if they're not her children. Those are a few of the points that I would point out. But like I said, there's lots more on Catholic.com Yehonatan, and I hope Yehonatan, make sure I get the accent on the antepenult, and check out Catholic.com. Just type in Brothers of Christ or Virginity of Mary.
Thank you very much for the call. Appreciate it. There are loads more folks on the line, so on we go. Daniel is in Spokane, Washington, watching on YouTube. Daniel, thank you very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, I just wanted to know if we're allowed to be cremated, and if so, can we have our ashes spread?
Okay, so we are allowed to be cremated under Catholic discipline, and we are not allowed to have our ashes spread, if you just mean like distributed outside or poured into the sea or something like that. The current Catholic discipline on this point is the ashes need to be kept together in the main. Now, that is not to say that they can't be in more than one place, but you can't just go dump them outside. There is a recent document that came out from the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith just at the end of last year, in which it indicated that you could inter some of the remains. The technical term for cremated remains is cremains. It also, you can just call them ashes, even though they're actually not ashes, they're crushed bone, because the flesh burns away and then they crush the bones, and that's what we call the ashes, but really it's crushed bone. And so you can take the cremated remains and inter them in common with other people's cremated remains. You can mix them in with other people's, as long as the name of the deceased person is preserved. There's a little more to say about this, and it's kind of interesting, so I'll say it on the other side of the break.
Hang on, if you would, Daniel. The break will be over as quick as that, and then we'll be right back and finish that answer for you. Catholic Answers Live, open forum, Jimmy Akin, our guest.
Why We're Catholic is the one book you can hand to anyone to invite them into or back to the Catholic faith. With more than 400,000 copies sold, Trent Horn's book has had a #1 ranking on Amazon.com for 5 years running. Now available in softcover, bulk cases, ebook, and on Audible. Find out what the excitement is all about. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic at shop.catholic.com or at a good Catholic bookstore. Visit whywe'recatholic.com.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
What if the voice of your deepest doubts about Catholicism rose up in the form of a human being and challenged you to defend your most foundational beliefs? That's the task apologist Trent Horn took upon himself in his new book, Devil's Advocate, a dialogue with his own best objections against the faith that he professes and defends. You can stand up against your doubts, and Trent will show you how. Pick up your copy of Devil's Advocate today at shop.catholic.com or at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers monthly giving club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
Tomorrow on More to Life, the life you were meant to live.
We'll look at how the theology of the body can help you live a more abundant life.
That's tomorrow on More to Life, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 Central on EWTN Radio.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live, a little bit of groovy music. I love it when it sneaks up on me like that, when I forget it's Thursday and then the groovy music shows up. Jimmy Akin here as our guest. Groovy music, lots of questions. That makes for a very nice Thursday afternoon. At least it's Thursday afternoon for us. Maybe it's Thursday evening where you are, or even Friday morning. Wherever you're listening, we're glad you're here. We're going back to Daniel to get an answer on cremation. I just got to read you this ad. How'd you like to save some money and end up with some great Catholic resources? Right now at shop.catholic.com. Take advantage of our store-wide savings with our 24-24-24 promotion. That's 24% off every order of $24 or more until the 24th of this month. Just use the promo code NEWYEAR when you check out at shop.catholic.com. Great time to get some resources by Jimmy Akin. The Fathers Know Best, The Daily Defense, The Bible is the Catholic Book, and his #1 School of Apologetics course, Beginning Apologetics, all waiting for you to get them at 24% off. Just use the promo code NEWYEAR at shop.catholic.com. And Carrie didn't make me say anything weird in that whole script. Thank you, Carrie. Daniel is on the line still, Jimmy, and wants to know about cremation, and you were in the midst of an answer.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it is possible, according to a very recent document that came out, to intermix the cremated remains of one person with the cremated remains of other people. And the reason that question got asked was because there are churches, sacred places, churches and similar graveyards, things like that, known as ossuaries, which have been around for centuries, that knit together the bones of deceased people. So like this is something you might find, for example, in a historic abbey or monastery where, they bury all the monks together, and then after the flesh decays, they take the bones and make structures out of them and this is their custom. It's not everybody's custom, but you go into some of these places and you'll see things that are look like chandeliers made out of skulls and stuff from the former monks. And you'll see frequently a written phrase in these ossuaries that in Latin, it's memento mori, and it means remember death. And so the idea is it's a reminder to the monks in the monastery who are still alive, remember, this is where you're going to end up, just like these other guys whose skeletons you can see right in front of you. And so a bishop asked, well, can you kind of do the same thing with cremated remains? Could you take cremains from different people and intermix them the same way we have the body parts of different people intermixed in an ossuary? And the DDF wrote back and said, yeah, there doesn't seem to be a problem in principle. I mean, they didn't say it this way, but heck, the cremated remains are just crushed bone anyway. So if you can mix the bones themselves, you could mix the little bits of bone. But what they wanted was just like if you go to a monastery, they're going to have a record of all the people who are buried in that crypt. They're not going to forget their individual identities. And so if you're going to mix cremated remains together, they want a permanent record of these are the people who were there so we can pray for them. There was also another question that this same bishop asked, which was, can you take a small part of the person's cremated remains and put them in a place that was significant to that person during life? And they said, yes, you can. So this is where you don't have to keep them all in the same urn. You can take out a small portion of them and store them in a place that was meaningful to that person in life. But and so you could look at that and say, well, that's scattering, but it's not the same thing as just dumping them somewhere. The requirement was that it be a sacred place, and that it not only has to be significant to the person in life, it has to be a sacred place, and there has to be a record of who this person is. So, for example, you could, with your parish's permission, if your parish was really important to you, even if most of your ashes are in an ossuary somewhere, let's say, you could have a small portion of your ashes stored in your parish because it's a sacred place and so forth, or in your parish graveyard or whatever. So there's more flexibility on this, but what is not presently allowed is scattering in the traditional sense, where you go and you essentially dump the ashes into the ocean or into the forest or from an airplane, just willy-nilly. That's not allowed, in part because what it doesn't do is preserve the memory of the person in a way that people who visit the location can pray for the departed.
Daniel, I'm going to leave it there. As I said, very busy today, lots of calls, and we've got Thomas the TikTok Engine here. So thank you, Daniel. I hope that was helpful to you. Thomas the TikTok Engine comes in from time to time, takes questions from TikTok, and then gets answers and brings them back to TikTok. Right? Did I do that right?
You did it. That's it, Ty. You nailed it.
Welcome back, Thomas the TikTok Engine. Waiting for the newest member of the TikTok family.
That's correct.
In April.
That's
with
correct.
Much anticipation.
Yes.
So, those of you who are in a praying mood, if you'd pray for Thomas and his wife and the child to come, we'd very much appreciate that. Thomas, go ahead with your TikTok question.
Thank you very much, Ty. Thanks for asking people to pray for us. That would be very appreciated. And Jimmy, thanks for answering this question. This person on TikTok asked us if we can do a video on the 7 apocryphal books of Scripture and talk about if there are connections to the New Testament and if they were accepted by Jews.
Okay, so there are 7 books, plus parts of 2 others, that are in the Protestant community often called Apocrypha. Catholics don't use that term. It means hidden, and there's nothing about these books that was ever hidden. They were part of standard Greek translations of the Bible from before the time of Jesus. So we use a different term for them. We commonly call them deuterocanonicals, and they are connected to the New Testament. There are various places in the New Testament that refer to these books. For example, in Hebrews chapter 11, it's giving a list of famous heroes of the Old Testament, and it mentions how some of the Old Testament heroes were martyred, even though they could have gotten released, but they didn't want to get released. They were willing to be martyred because they were hoping for a better resurrection. And that's a reference to something that happens in the book of 2nd Maccabees, which is one of these 7 books. You will not find people being martyred in order to obtain a better resurrection anywhere else in the Old Testament, but you will find it in 2nd Maccabees. Bible scholars of all persuasions, including Protestants, Bible scholars acknowledge these connections. They'll acknowledge that one, for example. They'll also acknowledge that in the early chapters of Romans, Paul is drawing on the deuterocanonical book of wisdom for some of the ideas that he expresses. And Jesus himself, in the Lord's Prayer in Matthew 6, follows up the Lord's Prayer by saying, by giving a little commentary, because one of the clauses of the Lord's Prayer is forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Jesus follows that up by saying, for if you do not forgive others their debts, neither will your heavenly Father forgive your debts. That's something that is expressed exactly once in the Old Testament, and it's in Sirach 28. It's in another of the deuterocanonical books. So we do find connections between deuterocanonical books and the New Testament. In terms of were they accepted by Jews, they were accepted by some Jews, not by all Jews. It varied from one Jewish community to another, but they were accepted by the Christian community.
Great. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Thomas. The TikTok Engine. Should we have people come up with names for the baby TikTok or no?
You know, I've been so annoying, like rejecting every name that my wife comes up with, that, you know, maybe we could have a few more suggestions for me to reject in addition.
You could have an internet contest. You could raise money. You could auction off the naming rights.
I love it.
The auction off the naming rights to the baby. Come on.
Think about that. I'll ask my beloved wife if that's okay.
I would pay money if you named the baby Bodie McBoatface.
Oh gosh. Jimmy, that's way more enticing to me than I think you realize. I got to respect a good meme.
Can call him Bodie for short, you know, just, hey, come over here, Bodie.
Or just call him Mick.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Bodie
McBoatface, just call him Mick. All right. Thank you again, Thomas.
Thank you, Si. Thank you, Jimmy.
Off we go to Ontario, Canada. Ava, our good old friend Ava in Ontario, watching on YouTube. Ava, welcome back.
Hello. Thank you very much.
I'm so glad you called again. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Okay. So I was wondering if you want to pray to a certain saint, but you can't find any prayers or novenas that are written to them, can you write your own?
Yeah, of course. You can pray in any words you want. There's nothing in the Christian faith that says you can only use pre-approved prayers. In fact, a lot of people make up prayers on the spot. They just pray extemporaneously. So if you can do that, you can make up prayers that you would use over a series of 9 days or whatever it is for the novena you're wanting to do. What you can't do in Catholic circles is automatically publish them. If you're going to publish prayers, then you need to get them run by the bishop to make sure there aren't any problems with them. You need to get an imprimatur on them. But in terms of private prayer, you can pray whatever you choose, and thus you can make up a novena if you wish, a series of 9 prayers.
Oh, thank you.
No problem.
Ava, it's always so nice when you call. I feel like we missed you for a while, but you've been back a couple times now. It's nice to talk with you.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, you brought us to the break, though, Ava, so off we go to the break, back with more questions for Jimmy Akin right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Hello, this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Keep your dial tuned to Catholic Answers Live.
In Morse code, the sequence SOS is a distress call. It's been said that it stands for Save Our Souls. Well, right now our world is in big trouble, and we're putting out an SOS call for help. Will you answer that call? St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, has hundreds of teams who share the good news with souls who don't know Jesus. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to get involved.
He is only one of 4 popes honored as the Great.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Leo I was pope at a time when Roman civilization was being overrun by barbarian armies. He stood as a light in the darkness and even saved the city of Rome from destruction by Attila and the Huns. Leo died in 461.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks, Sean in Port Perry, Canada, for telling me where I can get the Daniel Boone show. I appreciate that. Fess Parker, Daniel Boone. I think I've been saying the phones are busy, and I might have discouraged people. And now there's a line open, so if you want to get on it, 888-318-7884 is the number. Going to Ohio now. Rich is listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Rich, glad to have you. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
So in at Mass on Sunday during the petitions, that they use the word equity in the petition, and as I know, most people know, that is a socialist term, or as I like to say, it's a postmodern humanist materialist term that is used by those atheistic people. And I was going to write a letter to the church explaining all this, but I just wanted to blow it by you guys in case I missed something.
Okay.
Well, the term equity is a term that has undergone some evolution in meaning recently. I mean, historically, equity is something like the value. I mean, at least as how it's been most commonly used until quite recently, it would be like the value of an investment that you own. And recently, though, it's come to take on a new meaning. It's sometimes contrasted with the term equality, which itself has multiple different meanings. But one way that the two terms are understood when they're juxtaposed with each other is equality refers to equal opportunity, and equity refers to equal outcomes. So the idea is that we have equality if everybody has an equal opportunity. Like, let's say they want to go out and make $100. Well, everyone, if they've got an equal opportunity, then we have equality. But not everyone may succeed in making $100. Some people might make $100. Other people might make nothing. Some people might make $20. Some people might make $50. So there is equality here because everyone had an equal opportunity, but there's not equity because not everybody has the same result. And whereas there would be equity if everybody made $100, or if everybody made $50, or if everybody made $20, or if everyone made nothing. You'd have equity in each of those situations because the outcome was the same for everybody. And this term has become polarizing. It is, as you mentioned, used by various individuals, some of whom are socialistic or even communistic in their outlook. But it is at variance with the historic American ideal of equality, in the sense of we want everyone to be treated equal and have equal opportunity. Doesn't guarantee equal outcomes. And usually the only way you can have equal outcomes is by refusing to let some people exploit their freedom and reining in the freedom of some people. So this is a term that's quite divisive today. And even though there are some situations where equity may be appropriate, if you're just using the term equity in a parish setting without further qualification. And Rich, you didn't mention any further qualification. I didn't hear the prayer, so I don't know exactly how it was expressed. If you just say, may there be equity for all people, most of the congregation won't know what that means. And of the people who do, many of them, such as yourself, are likely to associate this with particular political movements. And that's something the church is very cautious about. Because politics is not a realm of church teaching, and we want to keep the church neutral in terms of political concerns. We want to pray for good things, but we want to keep the church neutral in terms of particular political movements, because people can reasonably disagree about the application of Catholic moral principles to different social situations. And so we shouldn't be descending to, particular, by which I mean specific policy proposals, like, we pray to the Lord that the minimum wage be raised from this level to this other level. That's just way too specific. Or we shouldn't be praying things like, we pray to the Lord that the zoning laws in this neighborhood get changed so this kind of business can open up. That's something that is just it's on too small a level. And certainly if you're praying for equality of outcome among all peoples, that's gonna have a lot of negative consequences, especially for people who otherwise would have had freedom to achieve more. You're not allowing them to achieve more. And so I would suggest that it would be better in a parish setting to avoid politically loaded terms and pray in terms of things that everybody can agree on. Like, how about justice? Justice, you can pray for justice for all people without a problem, because everybody should have justice. There are different conceptions of what does justice look like, and that's where things can get divisive, but we shouldn't be being divisive and political in the prayers at Mass. And so if it were up to me, if I were writing the prayers for a Mass, I would not use politically loaded terms like that. I would try to find things that are good and that we can all agree about, or at least broadly agree about, that are not associated with current particular political movements.
Does that make sense to you, Rich?
Yes. Perfect sense. Thank you very much. Have a great evening or afternoon.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you. Thanks very much. Elijah is in Birmingham, Alabama, listening on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Suddenly, I can't pronounce Guadalupe. Really? I don't know where that came from. I apologize, Guadalupe Radio Network. Elijah, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
It's okay. It's a hard word.
It's not that hard. Thank you very much. I appreciate you letting me off the hook, but that was a fail on my part. That was just a fail.
So my question is, from a Catholic reading of sacred scripture, what is the status of the Levitical covenant? And do we expect the fulfillment prophetically, or?
By Levitical covenant, do you mean a covenant that God made with the tribe of Levi, such that their descendants would be the servants, liturgical servants, and priests in the Jewish nation?
Okay, correct. Yes.
Okay. Well, the church's understanding is that that has been superseded, and that now Christ is our high priest, and he has other priests under him and other liturgical servants known as deacons. So the whole Jewish economy of worship was brought to an end from a Christian perspective by the destruction of the temple in AD 70, and has been succeeded by the liturgical economy introduced by and centered on Christ himself.
May I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, please do.
So with relation to the covenant with Judah, obviously Christ is genealogically related to Judah, but the Levites, he's not. So I guess my question is there a stipulation in that covenant I'm not remembering where it just sort of terminates when something, I think you're referring to Hebrews, if I'm not mistaken, or?
Yeah, and Hebrews indicates that Hebrews points out that Jesus is of the tribe of Judah, he's not of the tribe of Levi. Nevertheless, he's our high priest. And what Hebrews says is that a change like that means the law has changed. And so the law instituting there's not a description of anywhere I'm thinking of the God's use of the Levites as a covenant. I don't recall any passage in the Old Testament that refers to a covenant with Levi or anything like that. It was a law that in Judaism you had to be a descendant of Levi to have one of these functions. But according to the author of Hebrews, the law has changed.
Elijah, I'm going to leave it there because there are many, many folks on the line. Mary's in New York City watching on YouTube. Mary, could you try to be quick with your questions so Jimmy could get you an answer?
Yes, very quickly. With all the trouble in the world, wars, civil unrest, things just seem to be getting worse and worse. Is it Jimmy's opinion that we are at least in the beginning of the tribulation? That's my question.
Thank you, Mary.
No, it's actually not. The situation in the world right now, as bad as it is, ain't nearly as bad as it's been. Humans are subject to what's sometimes called hindsight bias, and that has a meaning I won't go into here because of time, but we tend to remember the past as being better than it was. And we therefore tend to compare present situations to the past unfavorably. We say things are worse now, and there's a popular idea that things are getting worse and worse. And this isn't unique to our generation. This is an inbuilt human bias that has been with us all the way down through human history. So if you go back to the ancient Greeks, you're going to find them, or the ancient Egyptians, or any ancient people in the Middle Ages, you're going to find people saying, oh, the youth are so disrespectful today. Things are so much worse now than they were when I was a kid. You're going to have all that kind of stuff happening in every single age because it's a known cognitive bias that we have. And so rather than relying on impressions of how things are going, we need to look as neutrally and comprehensively as we can at objective things. And actually, there's a very good case to be made that things are better now in human history. With all, believe it or not, with all the problems we've got today, they're actually better now than they have been in the past. And there are various metrics that you can look at to show that. The chance of dying violently, for example, whether by war or whatever else, is vastly lower than it has been at any point in human history. For a book on this, if you want to read it, and it's not by a Christian, but it contains valuable data, there's a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker. And he's not a Christian. In fact, I believe he's an atheist. But he points out, whether you measure it archaeologically over millennia or over centuries or over decades, the chance of dying by violence has just been going down. And the world is not becoming more dangerous and more violent. It's becoming the opposite. It's becoming safer. So That's not to say there aren't big problems today, including worrying concerns about religious liberty and things like that. There are, and we need to keep an eye on them, because eventually we will get to a point where the final tribulation before the second coming of Christ happens. But I don't see evidence that we're in it right now. I can't say for sure we're not at the very, very, very fringe beginnings, but I don't see evidence for saying we're in it now.
Mary, thank you for getting the question out quickly so Jimmy was able to get you an answer. There's still folks on the line. If you're on the line, hang on. We're going to come right back. If you haven't dialed yet, there'll be at least 2 lines open during the break. Perfect time to call. 888-318-7884. It's open forum, and I haven't said it enough, so I will say it now. Open forum means open to anyone. You do not have to be Catholic to call. The name of the show is Catholic Answers Live, but anybody is welcome. And if you have a question having to do with, well, just about anything, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's Open Forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest. You are welcome to call 888-318-7884. If you got a question you'd like to ask Jimmy, this is your opportunity, 888-318-7884. And as I said before we went to the break, open to anybody. Jimmy Akin, of course, the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, the author of many books, and senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. Ready for your questions, 888-318-7884. Jimmy, thanks for coming back for another hour. Not that I've never experienced that you failed to come back for another hour, but I still feel grateful for it.
Well, thank you. And likewise. Thank you for coming back for another hour. I mean, you could have just taken your keys, gotten in your car, and driven off, and you didn't.
I didn't. I could have done take this job and, well, I'm not going to do that whole song. But was that from a movie or something? Was there a movie?
No, that was a hit.
That was just a hit song.
Tennessee Ernie Ford, wasn't it?
I honestly don't remember.
I think they may have used it in a movie, but yeah.
I never want to say that about this job. I have had jobs where I would have liked to have said that, but
it was Johnny Paycheck.
Oh, the great Johnny Paycheck.
And they did make a 1981 film that featured it.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
But it's a 1977 country song. It was written by David Allan Coe.
I don't know David Allan Coe. Is he famous?
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, he was a long-haired redneck.
He was. Oh, that's the best kind of redneck.
He even had a song called Long-Haired Redneck.
Oh, I should have known.
You need to bone up on your country music side.
There's so many things, Jimmy. I have my lacuna have lacuna. That's how that's how my memory is. But I was going to say, I think that they will ask me to leave before I get in the car and drive away. I think somebody will go, your best days are behind you. And the whole mythical ride will be over.
You know, I remember watching an episode of The Simpsons years ago, because you remember The Cosby Show and how popular it was?
Yeah.
And it had crazy popular. It had a rivalry with The Simpsons for most popular show. And then The Cosby Show decided to go off the air. And they had an episode of The Simpsons where Bart and Homer are watching like the final episode of the Cosby Show. And Bart says, if I had a hit show, I would never end it. And Homer's like, that's the right attitude, boy. Bleed it dry, which they've then gone on to do with The Simpsons. Still on the air.
That's
after
my
30
plan.
years.
Bleed it dry. Yeah. Ezekiel, Ezekiel in Arizona, watching on YouTube. You are next, Ezekiel. Thanks for hanging around. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy. Did I go to the wrong line? No, it says.
Hello.
Oh, hi, Ezekiel. I apologize. I just jumped in real quick there because I thought no one was there. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Oh, hello. This is the first time I've ever done something like this, so.
Well, you're doing great. I'm messing up, but you're doing great, Ezekiel. So,
what's your question?
Thank you. So I had a question over the idea of purgatory, and if there was any scriptural proof of it.
Well, the term purgatory is a post-biblical term. It's a theological term, and it's just like many other, theological terms. There are, in fact, even the word Bible is post-biblical. So you're not going to find the word purgatory in Scripture, but you will find the idea that people need to be purified of their sins, not just forgiven, but actually healed of them, so that they no longer have disordered desires and they behave in a holy manner. And that process is known in the New Testament in some passages as sanctification. Sanctification means to be made saintly or holy. And we need to be made holy. It happens by the power of Christ. It's only because of him that we get the grace to become holy, but it is something that happens during the course of the Christian life. And so that purification from our disordered desires is something that begins in this life, but most people would acknowledge that they're not completely pure at the point that they die. They still have disordered desires, but we're not going to have those disordered desires in heaven. And so between death and heaven, there must come a purification, a final rush of sanctification, if you want to put it that way. And we can document both of these things from Scripture. We can document that that we are being made holy in this life through Christ's grace. We can document that we will not be unholy in heaven. And we can document from human experience that most of us are not going to be perfectly holy at the end of life. So we can infer the occurrence of purgatory or the final purification from these simple facts. We also have a couple of passages that have a more direct bearing on this. One of them is in 1 Corinthians 3, where St. Paul says that we're all going to be tested. Our works in this life are going to be tested, and if we've built well, we'll receive a reward. But if we have built poorly, then we'll see what we've built burn. He says our works are going to be tested by fire. Now that's a metaphor, but he says that even if your works burn up and you don't get a reward, you'll still be saved, but it will be like escaping through flames. And obviously, escaping through flames is not the funnest experience, even though I guess a few amusement parks have backdraft rides that kind of make you feel like you're escaping through flames. The real escaping through flames is not so fun. And so Paul indicates that there is an experience that even the saved can have that will be like escaping through flames. And so that would support a common understanding of purgatory, that it's not entirely fun, just like growing in holiness in this life is not entirely fun either. Sometimes we learn through getting knocked around a little bit, and it teaches us to do better. And the same thing seems to be true of the final purification after this life. We also learn from 2 Maccabees that the prayers of the living can assist those in purgatory. And so we've got a passage in 2 Maccabees, we've got a passage in 1 Corinthians 3. There are a few other passages that people appeal to, but those are the big two, aside from just the general principles of we're made holy over the course of the Christian life by Christ's grace, but if that's not finished by the time we die, then we'll need to be purified before we enter heaven. And so those are the key points I would make. Now, I should mention, Ezekiel, this comes up all the time. And so consequently, we have tons of stuff on Catholic.com. Just go to Catholic.com, type in purgatory. You're going to get bazillions of resources that will cover this and other points concerning it.
Ezekiel, thank you for the call, for getting us started this hour. And you said it's the first time, so how about if I send you a little gift? I'd like to send you a copy of Jimmy's book, A Daily Defense, 365 Days plus one to becoming a better apologist. I think that question, in fact, is in there, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Ezekiel, hang on, and we'll send it to you. I'm going to go to Virginia now, where Benedict is waiting on the line. Benedict, are you there with us?
Say hi. Hi.
Hi, Benedict. How old are you?
4.
You're 4. All right. Well, you're very welcome here. Go ahead with your question for Mr. Aiken.
Can you bless God?
Can you bless God?
Yes, you can bless God. In fact, in many in the Bible itself, there are many passages that talk about blessing God. It means something a little different than when you're blessing another person. Like if I were to say to you, Benedict, God bless you, what I would mean is, may God do something good for you, Benedict. And so that would be when you're blessing another person, another human here on earth. But, it wouldn't make so much sense to say, well, may God do good things for God, because he doesn't have needs the way we do. He's infinitely happy, infinitely perfect. He doesn't have any needs. And so it wouldn't make as much sense to say, God bless you to God in that sense. But it is common in Scripture to refer to praising God, as blessing God. And so when we praise God and say, God, you're really great, you're good, you're strong, you're smart, you're loving. When we talk about all of God's good qualities, Scripture refers to that as blessing God. So yes, we can't bless God in that sense.
Benedict, I think that was the first time you called, and you did a great job, as did whoever that woman was who was helping you. You both did a really good job. Thank you for the call. Benedict, we have to take a break now, so we will say goodbye and go to our break, and we'll be right back with more calls for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
Communities in Southern California gather to celebrate the beauty and dignity of every human life. EWTN takes you to San Francisco for live coverage of the Walk for Life West Coast, Saturday, January 20th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. Then, don't miss inspiring speakers and music during One Life LA at 5 p.m. Eastern. The pro-life festivities begin Saturday, January 20th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern on EWTN TV and radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It is open forum, and there are 2 lines open, which is good news. If you've got a question, 888-318-7884. I think we've already gone to Spokane, Washington once, but back we go to Spokane, Washington. Tom is in Spokane. Thank you for the call, Tom. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hello.
Hi, Tom.
Can you hear me? You're hearing me good, huh?
Yes, very well.
Yeah.
Hey, I got a question about the image, about us being made in the image of God. There's 2 reasons I ask this. First of all, no one has seen God, and the second reason is because it seems like they're acknowledging the presence of aliens. So, and they don't seem to, from the descriptions, they don't look like us. So, how do you interpret the image of God?
Okay, so this is a concept that has a long history in terms of Jewish and Christian theologies. There have been a lot of different proposals. Now, of course, it mentions in Genesis 1 that God made man in his likeness and image, and that's generated a lot of discussion. One of the ideas that people have proposed is that it refers to our physical form, that the fact that we're bipeds, that we have 2 legs, 2 arms, 2 eyes, we walk upright, basically the fact that we look human that's the image. And so that would mean, if that's true, that God looks like a human. But the problem is it's elsewhere revealed, as Jesus says at the end of Jesus says in John 4 that God is a spirit. And as he says in Luke 22, a spirit does not have flesh and bones. So God doesn't have a physical body. There may be occasions in Scripture where God creates a vision where people see him as if he has a physical body, but he really doesn't. Because, for a whole bunch of reasons, but God has no physical body apart from the incarnation. And since Genesis 1 occurs before the incarnation, we know that's not what's being discussed here. So the concept of image does not refer to our physical form. And that means that the image of God is not tied to a particular physical form. In fact, you will find thinkers who would say, well, angels, they might also bear the image of God. even though they're not, because they're similar to God in some ways, just like we're similar to God. Obviously, being in someone's image means there's some kind of similarity. And so, you could say, well, angels bear the image of God too. And if angels bear the image of God and humans bear the image of God, then other intelligent creatures like, aliens might bear the image of God too. But that understanding of the image presupposes that it's based on certain qualities that we have in common with God. And there have been different proposals for what those qualities might be, like intelligence. We're rational creatures. God, is omniscient. He knows everything. He's smarter than anybody. So he has intellectual qualities just like we do. Other qualities have been proposed, like moral decision making or freedom of the will or things like that. But most recent scholarship has not tended to favor this idea. Instead, what most recent scholarship has done is focus on the ancient Near Eastern context for what did it mean to have an image of someone. And for example, in ancient Egypt, and of course the Hebrews had been in Egypt, so they had experience of what things were like in Egypt. If you had an image of Pharaoh, the king, then people were expected to treat the image as the king's representative. You didn't just, you had to treat it respectfully because it served as a kind of surrogate for the king. And that understanding of image is what much recent scholarship has tended to understand as the background for Genesis 1. Because in context, God doesn't just say, let us make man in our image, full stop. He says, let us make man in our image and let him rule over the birds and the fish and the plants and all of creation. So it seems to be this idea of man as a representative or substitute for God to govern the created world. That seems to be what most modern scholars, or many of the competent modern scholars, have concluded the image really is. It means we represent God as his agent in governing creation, the physical creation, on his behalf. And so I think that's what that is. That's my best understanding anyway. There's also a document you might want to check out. It came out around 2003, 2004 from the International Theological Commission, which doesn't make it magisterial teaching, but it does mean that the magisterium has a favorable view of what the document says. It's called Communion and Stewardship. And it discusses the image of God in theology. So if you Google communion and stewardship in quotes, it should come up and you can read it online.
Tom, thank you. I appreciate the question. One line open. Nope, no lines. All of a sudden that line went away. Well, there'll be a line open shortly. 888-318-7884 is the number. Let's go back to Ontario, Canada. Carmen in Ontario, Canada, watching on Facebook. You are next, Carmen. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy. Hi, Carmen. No? I'll tell you what, I'm going to come back.
Hi there.
Oh, hey, Carmen. You got a question for Jimmy Akin?
Hi. Yes, thank you. Gracious and knowledgeable ones.
Thank you, Carmen. Can you speak directly into your phone?
Yes, I'm getting a bit of a delay.
All right, just ask your question, and then we'll put you on hold while you hear the answer.
All right, so my friend is Croatian, and she was in the Bosnian-Herzegovina war in the 90s. And she said that the Catholics, because she's Protestant now, and she said that she could never be Catholic because she feels that the Catholics and Orthodox had something to do with the atrocities or the prejudice that was exercised in the war.
So you want to know how to answer her.
What I should say to her.
Gotcha.
Okay. Well, I would say that it's very tragic that she had that experience, and we want to pray for her and for the victims of all wars. It is true that people in a given region that are involved in a war have religions. Even if their religion is atheism, they have a religion, and people of every religion have had prejudices that have contributed to wars. They have had hostilities that have contributed to wars, and you can't look at that fact as if it disproves the truth of their religion. Because if you did, then every religion would be disproved, because including Protestantism, but also including atheism, because atheists have certainly been involved in wars that were very traumatizing. In fact, atheist states like the Soviet Union and China and Cambodia, they had atheist regimes that killed a lot of people. And so it's not like you can, find some group that's pure in this regard. Everybody, all human beings are sinful. Human beings tend to have religions, and so you can find representatives of every religion who have been sinners, because all ordinary human beings are sinners. And that's going to include Protestantism. If you want to talk about prejudices that have contributed to war and human suffering, well, that includes Protestants. Not only have Protestants fought wars with Catholics and persecuted Catholics, like in England, for example, and in Ireland, where members of the Protestant Church enacted what are known as the penal laws that established punishments for Catholics, and even resulted in the martyrdom of some Catholics like St. Thomas More and St. John Fisher and St. Edmund Campion and others who were martyred for their faith. You can find Protestants in this country who have exhibited prejudice and engaged in violence, like in the American Protestant Know Nothing movement from the 1800s, which engaged in anti-Catholic persecution and rioting. You certainly, you might talk to a black person here, an African American person, and say, have American Protestants ever discriminated against your people? And yeah, they did. That's the reason why we have differences between Northern Baptists and Southern Baptists, for example. They split over the issue of slavery, and there's certainly been prejudice galore to go around from everybody. So you really can't look at prejudice and violence as if it's a test of religious truth. What you need to focus on is what evidence is there, apart from the poor practice of the practitioners of a religion. You need to look at what's the evidence for the religion itself. And when you do that, I'm as a Catholic apologist, I'm confident the evidence points to the Catholic understanding of the Christian faith being true. And the Protestant understanding, while it's honorable and correct in many ways, is not the ultimate correct understanding of the Christian faith. We have lots of products about that and lots of resources for free online about that, and you can look at those and consider them, get them for your friend or point your friend to them. But the fundamental point that I would make with your friend is, have people who belong to a religion done bad things is not a good test of, is that religion true? Because all humans do bad things, and that applies to members of every religion. I hate to say it, including our Protestant friends.
Carmen, thank you. I do hope that was helpful for you. Thank you very much for the call and the question. On we go here to California. Miguel is in California, watching or listening on Twitch. Miguel, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes, hello?
Hello, go ahead, Miguel. You're on the air.
Okay. My question was if wearing Nikes were a sin, because I recently found out that they came from a pagan goddess, which was the goddess of victory.
Okay. Yeah, Nikes are named after Nike.
Okay.
Yeah.
No. No, it's not a sin to wear Nikes. Nobody even knows that Nike was a Greek goddess of victory. They're not connected with her worship in any way. The executives who own the Nike brand do not worship a Greek goddess. If you wear Nikes, you're not worshiping a Greek goddess. Nobody, by the fact that you're wearing them, is going to be tempted to worship a Greek goddess. And if they are, they've got some weird temptation that you can't be responsible for. So this is no different than this. I'll give an example in just a second, but it's no different than like having one of the evangelists in the New Testament named after a Greek god, Apollos. He was named after the Greek god Apollo. So this is just a historical reference that has no live religious content. And so it's not a sin. You should not be scrupulous about this.
Thanks, Miguel. Right back with more Open Forum, Catholic Answers Live.
When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers monthly giving club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
Is relativism dead? It sure seems dead. Each day, new moral demands are made, and they are presented to us as absolutes. Everything, from transgender ideology to physician-assisted suicide, is presented as a moral good that all right-thinking people must accept. But Catholic Answers' own Carlo Broussard says look deeper, and you will see today's moralism is just relativism dressed up in new clothes. Carlo's eye-opening book, The New Relativism, shines a light on how the sacred moral teachings of this age cover up a deep denial of moral truth. Order your copy of The New Relativism today at shop.catholic.com and be prepared to defend the truth against aggressive relativism. The New Relativism at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Tomorrow on More to Life, the life you were meant to live.
We'll look at how the theology of the body can help you live a more abundant life.
That's tomorrow on More to Life, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 Central on EWTN Radio.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Oh, Jimmy, K218b. That's that. I just looked it up. K218b.
Okay.
The thing we were talking about at the break.
An exoplanet.
Exoplanet. Yeah. Apparently, a lot of them have a B in them. So me just saying, that's some planet.
Because they give them letters. Because they here in our solar system, you could give them numbers because you know what the closest one to the sun is, and you can number them. So Mercury is first, Venus is second, Earth is third. So we're the third rock from the sun.
Yeah.
But you don't know in another solar system which planets are closest to the sun because we can't see the really small ones. And at least under ordinary circumstances, the way we detect exoplanets is either by their gravitational effect on their sun or by observing them as they cross the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So their solar system has to be aligned in such a way that we see them do that. And you can't count on that. So we don't know how many planets there are in a given system. All we can talk about is how many we've discovered. And rather than give them numbers, they give them letters. So the first planet they discover in a system, that's A. The second planet, that's B. The third planet, that's C, and so on. And I know there have been ones where they discovered at least 6 or 7 planets
Mm-hmm.
in a given system. But we don't know that there aren't others in there that we haven't seen yet, and so we can't give them numbers the way we do here.
But the reason I was mentioning to Jimmy about K2-18b was I was just reading an article about how there's some rumors that they might have found evidence of life on this planet. So I was, of course, got to ask Jimmy Akin about that. But we won't know for a long time. But we won't be visiting K2-18b at any time. It's 120 light years away.
124.
124 light years. That's not. It's always that last 4 too. That's where I'm like, I need a
It's
bathroom.
really
Should
hard.
I stop? All right. Tracy's in Kentucky, listening on the EWTN app. Tracy, thanks for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hello. How
Hi,
are you guys
Tracy.
this evening?
Very well, thank you.
Okay. I am studying Corinthians right now, and we're talking about the various gifts of the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of our questions was, have you ever experienced or witnessed the gift of prophecy? Which made me start really thinking, I have kind of 2 questions. So what is the main difference between the gift of prophecy and the gift of words of knowledge? And the other question is kind of funny, came up last night in our women's prayer group, is if you have a meat broth without the meat on a Friday during Lent, are you committing a sin or you're not following along with the abstinence?
Okay, so let's deal with the second question first because it's much more straightforward. The answer is no. You are not breaking the church's discipline or law if you have bone broth. I did a study of the legislative history of this area some time ago, and it's on jimmyakin.com if you want to read about it. Just Google Jimmy Akin and soups made with meat. And one of the things you find out is that originally soups made with meat were listed as one of the prohibited items for days of abstinence, which Friday traditionally has been. Today in the United States, we're not required to abstain except on Ash Wednesday and the Fridays of Lent. On those, we are, without a good reason, we're required to abstain from meat. Other Fridays, we're not required to. But even on those, when the abstinence from meat discipline applies, if you look at the legislative history, you find out that they dropped soups made with meat from what was prohibited. And when they drop a provision in a law, that provision no longer binds. Therefore, soups made with meat are permitted these days. And I'm sure they did that because lots of soups are made with meat stock. You know, historically, if you wanted to make a soup, you got some meat, you put it in a pot, you at least made the stock from it. And once you've done that, there's little bits of meat in it, and there's no way to get those out. So it would be very hard, given how common meat stocks are in soups, which is essentially what bone broth is. It's made from animal bone that has been boiled or diffused otherwise in water. You'd be cutting out a huge chunk of what people might eat on abstinence days. They decided they didn't want to do that, and so soups made with meat, which would include bone broth, is now perfectly fine. So having said that, let's talk about 1 Corinthians 12, which is the other passage that you mentioned. Now, St. Paul gives more than one list of the spiritual gifts in his writings. There's one of them is here in 1 Corinthians 12. There's another one in Romans 12. And I think that we have some assistance in figuring these things out by comparing the different lists and by looking at the lists individually. So here in 1 Corinthians 12, starting with verse 7, Paul says, "To each," meaning each Christian, "is given a manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. To one," meaning one Christian, compared to other Christians, "is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, and to another the utterance of knowledge," or word of wisdom, or word of knowledge in other translations, "according to the same Spirit. to another, faith by the same Spirit, to another, gifts of healing by one Spirit, to another, the working of miracles, to another, prophecy, to another, the ability to distinguish between spirits, to another, various kinds of tongues, to another, the interpretation of tongues. All of these are inspired by one and the same Spirit, who apportions to each one individually as he wills. So, if we're trying to figure out this list, one of the things I would be cautious about is identifying word of wisdom and word of knowledge with prophecy, because prophecy is also on this same list. And although I know that there are individuals, particularly in the Pentecostal and charismatic communities, that want to identify words of wisdom and words of knowledge as a kind of prophetic utterance. You know, I used to years and years ago, before I was even Catholic, I'd sometimes watch the 700 Club, which was a charismatic Protestant talk show. And they would have the hosts of the 700 Club say, okay, we're going to have some words of knowledge now. And they would concentrate and they would open themselves to God's Spirit. And they would say, there's someone in the audience in the listening audience who has just lost a loved one, and God wants you to know they're okay, or things like that. They're reporting supernatural, or they'll talk about health problems and say they're getting healed. And what they're doing is they're reporting receiving supernatural knowledge under the title word of knowledge. But that's what prophecy is. That's exactly what prophecy is. So since we've already got prophecy on this list, whatever word of knowledge and word of wisdom are, they seem to me to not be prophecy. They're not receiving direct download supernatural information in this way. So what else might they be? Well, obviously, if I have a word of knowledge, I'm giving someone some kind of knowledge. If I'm speaking a word of wisdom, I'm giving someone a piece of wise advice. And I think that's all they are. I think that they are subsumed under two aspects of a gift that is not mentioned on this list. If you look at Romans 12, you will see Paul mentions the gift of teaching. Well, teaching is a pretty big function in the church. That's like a really big function. Teaching other people about God and what they ought to do in their lives, that's big. That's important. That's a big, important spiritual gift. So why isn't it on this list? Why would Paul just omit teaching on this list here in 1 Corinthians 12, given how important teaching is to, among other things, Paul's teaching ministry? Well, I think he did omit it. I think it's here. I think Paul refers to teaching as word of knowledge, where you give people knowledge about God, or at least theology, and word of wisdom, where you give people wise advice. I think those are the two components, knowledge and wisdom, of what are communicated through the gift of teaching. So in my view, based on the fact prophecy is already on this list, and prophecy is like a direct download of supernatural knowledge, and the fact that teaching is not on this list, but giving someone a word of wisdom or a word of knowledge can plausibly be understood as the two sides of teaching, which is mentioned on other lists like Romans 12, I think that's what they are. I think that's what word of knowledge and word of wisdom is.
Tracy, that brings us to the break, so I will leave it there. But thank you very much for the call. I hope that was helpful. More Open Forum with Jimmy right after this.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
One of the biggest mistakes a Christian can make is to try to do good without God's help. St. Therese said, when we trust only ourselves and not God, our soul becomes incapable of virtue. Her remedy? Works of charity. And the greatest work of charity is to share the gospel. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we encourage you to share the gospel with someone who doesn't know Jesus. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Bible in a Year with me, Father Mike Schmitz, is now available right here on Catholic Radio. Encounter God's voice and learn how to live life through the lens of Scripture with a new episode every day. I hope you'll join me as we discover how the story of salvation unfolds and how we fit into that story today.
Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz, tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live, open forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Man, full lines again. So back we go to the phones. Let's go to Ray in New Jersey, listening on to EWTN on channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Ray, glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Good day, gents.
Good day.
And Cy, please don't leave. Please.
Oh, no, I'm not leaving. That's what I was saying.
He's got to go home. He's only scheduled to be here for another 18 minutes.
But thank you, Ray. I like that.
He's got a wife, and he needs to go home and be with her.
Yeah, I need to have some meat soup. That's what I'm having for dinner, meat soup.
Well, here's my question. During Christmas, before Mass, I was reading the Gospel. It was Luke. And it was the section where Jesus was wrapped in swaddling clothes, which means his hands and feet were tied, or wrapped up tight so they couldn't move. And then I looked up, and there was Jesus on the cross, and his hands again were unmovable. And I was wondering if there was anything in the Church Fathers as to, was it just the thought I had, or was there any kind of meaning to that?
Well, there have been people who have drawn comparisons between Christ's infancy and his crucifixion because he's in a state of helplessness in both situations. There have also been people who have linked Christ's infancy to Mary's death. Because there are even Eastern icons that you'll see of, Christ holding a baby Virgin Mary wrapped in swaddling clothes. It's like just as she took care of him at the beginning of his life in swaddling clothes, he took care of her spirit at the end of her life before her Assumption. Which then, and his care gets depicted as the kind of care she gave him, with him caring for her spirit. But there also, as I said, have been, Christ was helpless as a baby. He was helpless on the cross. And so people have drawn comparisons like that. In the last 2,000 years, people are certainly have going to done that repeatedly. If you're asking, was Luke thinking this? I don't know. I don't have a basis for saying that Luke was thinking this. I can't rule it out, because authors have lots of things they think that they don't necessarily put on paper, even just ideas that flit through their mind. But at least on paper, the function of swaddling clothes is to show that Mary was being a responsible parent, because that's what you did for a baby in this context. You wrapped it up so that it would be warm and it wouldn't thrash about and injure itself and things like that. And so what the function of Luke mentioning this in the text is not to point forward to the crucifixion, where his hands were not bound. If he had been tied to the cross rather than nailed to the cross, there would be maybe more of a basis here. But it's the point that Luke is making by mentioning the swaddling clothes is Mary was being a good parent. She was loving her child. She was caring for her child. And so I don't have a basis for saying that Luke was thinking of the swaddling clothes in relationship to the crucifixion. He might have, and certainly other people have compared the two incidents in Christ's life, but I don't have a basis for asserting that Luke was.
Ray, thank you very much. I am going to go quick now because we are getting near the end, and we have quite a few still on the phones. Alex in Milwaukee, watching on YouTube. You are up next, Alex. No, not Alex. Alex is not there. VZ in Missouri, also watching on YouTube. VZ, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi. I'm a Catholic, and I've always been a Catholic. My husband is a convert, and he would like to join the Knights of Columbus. I've never really been familiar with them. I would like to know more about them, please.
You said you've never been what with the Knights of Columbus?
I've never really heard about them much. I don't know if it's because I wasn't in the U.S. before. I just want to learn more about them. What do they do?
Okay, so I know that today the Knights of Columbus are a worldwide organization, but you mentioned you're not from here in the U.S., and I could understand in some parts of the world they may not be as familiar because they did originate here in the U.S. What happened was in the 19th century, it was before the internet, it was before TV, it was before radio, and so people had to make their own entertainment. And it often was, sometimes they got together and had parties where both sexes were present, where men and women were present, but they also had separate socializing that they would do. So men would get together in men's groups, women would get together in women's groups, and this was a popular thing. That was how they socialized. Some of these organizations kind of got a little interesting. One of the things people liked to do in the 19th century was dress up at their gatherings. And so sometimes you'd have men's organizations where they'd wear uniforms. And sometimes you would, one of the big things to do was make it a secret society where you got to, take an oath that was secret, and where you didn't talk to other people about what happened in your group. You only talked about it with people in your group. And sometimes people would, take on outrageous titles. And sometimes, especially in men's groups, they would model themselves after knights from the Middle Ages who were chivalrous and went out and did good deeds, or at least what they perceived as being good deeds. And some of these groups were anti-Catholic, like the Freemasons or the Ku Klux Klan or the Loyal Order of Oddfellows. And because these were popular groups for men to join, in the Catholic Church in America, some people got the idea, in fact, there was a priest overseeing this, said, let's come up with a Catholic alternative so that Catholics can have a men's group that will genuinely be good and it won't be anti-Catholic. And so Catholics can join it in good conscience. And they came up with the Knights of Columbus, Columbus being another name for the Americas. So they're like the Knights of America. At least that's how the name started. And so they came up with this group. They wear uniforms sometimes. They have an oath. It's not as secret today as it used to be, but it was essentially a men's club. And to justify having a men's club, they also agreed to do acts of charity. And so here in the United States and in other places, the Knights of Columbus, in addition to having fellowship among men, friendships among men, they also support a variety of charities. I know at one of the parishes, at the parish I used to attend in California, the Knights of Columbus sponsored a wheelchair ministry to raise funds to buy wheelchairs for people in the developing world who otherwise couldn't afford wheelchairs. And I know that the Knights of Columbus are involved in a lot of different charities. They also have insurance policies for their members, which is another reason that these clubs, is another function or service that these clubs provided for their members was, access to insurance policies. And so they try to do, but basically they're a Catholic men's club that tries to do good things in the world.
I hope that was helpful for you. VZ, I'm going to continue to try to get everybody on. Thank you very much for the call. Laura is in Central North Carolina watching on YouTube. Laura, thank you very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
time. I want to know what we understand about a person's soul under these conditions. Mm-hmm. The person enters dementia during end stage of life. Mental faculties just unravel and disintegrate. He withdraws, loses contact with reality, including where he is and even who he is. The person loses interest in and even recognition of his loved ones, seems to stop caring about them at all. When such conditions are underway, what is our Catholic understanding of the state of that person's soul and their potential now for salvation? How would they make it to heaven? If they do make it, will they once again recognize and cherish their loved ones who also make it to heaven after them?
Laura, is this a current situation?
It's a situation that has happened in my life more than once.
Okay.
But not current.
Okay. I'm very sorry to hear it's happened. Obviously, it happens with a lot of people, and it's always sad when it does. The Catholic understanding is that the state of our soul is determined by our freely made choices. And when a person it becomes demented to such an extent that they can no longer freely make a choice, it's not an informed, rational choice because they're not rational anymore, then they cannot at that point change the state of their soul. And so they would remain in whatever state they had chosen before they became demented. If they had previously chosen on some level, even if it wasn't conscious, but if they had previously chosen on some level to be open to God and his goodness and grace, then they would remain in a state of grace after they became demented. If they had previously freely chosen on whatever level to reject God and his grace, then they would remain outside of a state of grace once they became demented, assuming that dementia remains constant. But dementia doesn't always remain constant. Sometimes people may have moments of lucidity. And so even if someone had chosen against God, in a moment of lucidity, they might change that and come back to God. And in fact, there are situations where, particularly as death is approaching, people experience a period of lucidity. This is a recently documented phenomenon. It's been happening for a long time, but it recently got a name in the medical and psychological literature. Very frequently, in the days or hours before a person dies who is demented, they will suddenly regain a lot of mental function. And this is known as terminal lucidity. Lucidity because they're now mentally lucid again, and terminal because it's at the end of their life. And this gives them the opportunity to make additional choices. And this could be something God has built into us to help us choose him before we have to meet him. Also, this is a very comforting thing frequently when it happens. It doesn't happen with everybody, but when it happens, it gives the family a chance to say goodbye and make peace and things like that. And one of the other things that can happen is the person can request the last sacraments and receive them, even if they're about to die in a few hours or days. Even though if they don't request the last sacraments, even if they never become terminally lucid, we can still, if they're Catholic, we can still request the last sacraments on their behalf. And as long as they're not like clinging bitterly to, even if they weren't in a state of grace when they became demented, and even if they're not in a state of grace when they receive the last sacraments, as long as their will is not fixed on evil, then the sacraments will give them God's grace and they'll die in his friendship. So whether it's they've already accepted God's grace before they become demented, whether they accept God's grace in a moment of lucidity after they've become demented, or whether they receive the last sacraments and on some deep level are open to God's grace, in any of those ways, they would die in a state of grace and be with God in heaven.
Laura, thank you very much for the call. Thanks to everybody who called. And Jimmy Akin, thank you for two kind of fun hours. I enjoyed this.
My pleasure. Yeah.
All right. We'll see what you say about my shirt next time. It's fascinating to find out your judgment on my shirts.
You haven't even mentioned mine.
I apologize. That is a very nice purple shirt. My bad.
You.
Next time. See ya right here, God willing, on